Good evening. This is a quick video from section 5.1 just to get you started on the homework. Make sure you're making progress since we no longer have late homework. I want everybody to get their homework done tonight. Now, the challenge in section 5.1 for a lot of people is looking at the problems numbers 1 and 2, because today in class we talked about how to find the height. We said, well, to find the height, you plug the x value into the function that tells you how high the rectangle is. But in problems 1 and 2, if you take a look in your textbook, you'll notice that they already give you the graph. The graph is provided. So instead of being able to plug a number in, we're just going to use the graph for the height. Now, the tricky thing about that is the graph doesn't exactly end or match up to one of the coordinates on the graph paper that they provided. So they expect you to estimate. Okay, that's what they want you to do. They want you just to take a look at the graph and say, oh, I think it's this high. So if you'll give me a second here, I'm just going to pull my book over here and we'll take a look at problem 2, or we'll look at problem 1, for example. It says the resulting values from the given graph of f use 5. So they want us to use 5 rectangles to find a lower estimate and an upper estimate for the area under the given graph of f from 0 to 10. So they want us to use 5 rectangles, and we're going from 0 to 10. So we have to split the interval from 0 to 10 up into 5 pieces. So if we think about that, we're going from 0 to 10. That interval is 10 units long, right? 10 units long. And if that interval is 10 units and we want 5 pieces, well, 5 goes into 10 2 times, so each interval is going to be 2 units long. Now, you'll notice they didn't use the right-hand endpoint or the left-hand endpoint. They used upper limit and lower limit. So we're just going to do it with the right-hand endpoint, then we're going to do it with the left-hand endpoint, and whichever one's above, we're going to call that the upper that they're looking for in the book, and whichever one's below, we're going to call it the lower. So the first thing you need to do is kind of copy that graph over onto your homework paper, okay? Now, once you've got that done, and I'm not going to pause and wait for you here, but once you have that done, then you're going to have to put your intervals at, well, you're going from 0 to 10, so the first endpoint's going to be at 2. That's the end of the first interval. Then your next one's going to be at 4, and then your next one's going to be at 6, next one's going to be at 8, and finally the last interval is going to end at 10. Now, we're going to find R sub 5 and L sub 5. Okay, that's what we're going to do. We don't know which one's the upper and which one's the lower. We'll know as soon as we draw them on our paper, of course. So I would suggest that you draw the graph, mark down your intervals, and then do a right-hand picture, and then draw the graph again. Don't do them both on the same drawing. Draw the graph again and do a left-hand picture. And then it'll be very obvious to you which one's the upper and which one's the lower. The trick, remember, is all you're supposed to do here is just add the area up of the 5 intervals. The 5 rectangles, pardon me. That's all you have to do is just add up the area of the 5 rectangles. You already know the base of each rectangle. That's 2. And to determine the height of the rectangle, you're just going to estimate. And every year this problem drives students nuts, because when you look at the graph, you'll notice, well, it doesn't always end on a nice number. Well, I agree, it doesn't always end on a nice number. Hence the reason they tell you to estimate in the problem. They don't tell you to find the exact value. So at 2 on your graph, we're going to go over here and we're going to go up and we're going to say, okay, how high do I think my graph is? And each of us are going to come up with slightly different answers. And that's okay, especially when we get to problem 2. When you get to problem 2, you're going to get a little bit different. You know, someone's going to say, well, it's 0.6, and someone else is going to say it's 0.7, and someone else is going to say it's 0.8. That's okay, because you're just practicing and estimating. So in problem number 1, you're just going to guesstimate the height. You look at the first interval ends at 2, and you go over here to see where your graph ends at 2, and it looks pretty close to 4. 1, 2, oh heck, that's not 4, that's 3. So it looks pretty close to 3. So you could use 3 there. You could use 3.1, 2.9, whatever you feel is appropriate. But you're just estimating. What you don't want to use for the height at 2 is, something like 12, because it's not 12. It's not even 4. Like I said originally, that was wrong. It's 3. So that's where a lot of people get stuck. on these first couple of homework problems because you want to use the function to find the height. Now, when you look down at problem number 3, the function there is cosine. Okay, the function is cosine. And the interval goes from 0 to pi over 2. And you've got to split up into 4 rectangles. So you go from 0 to pi over 2, and you want to split that up into 4 equal parts. So you need a fourth of pi over 2. That's what we're doing, right? We're just splitting it up into 4 equal parts. So we have pi over 2 wide, and we want to split that up into 4 slices. So you take a fourth times pi over 2, you get pi over 8. And then you get 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, and finally 4 pi over 8, which is pi over 2. Now, your job here is to use those 4 rectangles to do a right hand and a left hand, or whatever they ask you for. So, right hand first, left hand second. Now, you're going to have to use your calculator here to find the heights because, while we can find cosine of pi over 2, we can find cosine of pi over 4, well, we don't know cosine of pi over 8. I mean, we do if we remember our half-angle identities, but who wants to remember our half-angle identities right now? So the big question students always have when they come back the day after this assignment is given is, I didn't understand how to find the heights. So I hope that this little video helped you find the heights. Remember, the width is always found by taking the length of your interval and dividing it by how many partitions you want. If you have an interval that's 10 wide in problem number 1 and you want 5 subintervals, then you're going to take the 10, you're going to divide it by 5, each interval is going to be 2 wide. And in problem number 1, we find our height just by looking at the graph and estimating. And that's exactly what we do in problem number 2. In problem number 3, we're going to have to plug the values into the function, f of x equals cosine x. So we'll plug in pi over 8 with our calculator, that'll tell us the height. We'll plug in pi over 4 with our calculator, that'll tell us the height, etc. Okay? And problem 5 works out exactly like problem number 3. Right? So I hope this little video helps you get started on your homework. If you have any more questions, I'll take care of them tomorrow. Have a nice evening.